Hi everyone. Happy final clue to Daingean Day. I can see you over here. We've got Mel, Ruth, and Audrey, and Adele all saying oh Judy, how you're down there from Canada, Newfoundland as well. Lovely to see you all there. We're back to fairly typical Irish weather here. So we had a month nearly of what's for Ireland blazing hot weather. For anyone else, pretty middle of the road May weather, but was warm for here. But we're back down to more normal temperatures here. But it's easier to wear wool, to knit wool, all the rest of it. It feels a lot more comfortable. So we are on the Daingean Clue 3, which of course is sleeves and the steeking. So if there's any of you out there who have questions or something you really want to make sure I answer over the next little while, pop it up in the chat. I'm able to see it all here on the side. And I also have several questions that came in over the last couple of days from knitters on KnitHub. So if you do have a question, come on in. And in the meantime, I'll just kind of talk a little bit through the clue and what's involved, kind of things that you might want to look out for as we go through. Ruth, you've had a haze from the Canadian wildfires. Oh, apparently, I actually heard that it's even had an impact on the sun and over as far here as in Ireland. Now the clouds would have to clear for that to actually be the case today. So I don't know, but I just remember reading an article yesterday talking about that. So it's incredible the impact things like fires and what seem like a fairly geographically I suppose a small section can frequently end up with much bigger impacts worldwide. But yeah, let me know if you do have any questions, as I say, coming through. And in the meantime, we'll take a look at it. So there's two different options. First of all, the long sleeve version, which you can see on the cardigan here, or the short sleeved one shown on the sweater here. But both options are given for both the sweater and for the cardigan. So it's just that they're shown each differently on the two samples, but you can take your pick regardless of which one you're actually making. Audrey, you're saying for the sweater, is the neck edging done with a smaller needle gauge? It just states shorter circular, not which size. Oh, sorry about that. Yes, it's done in the same one as you would use for the stockinette stitch. Because the only time that I changed was for knitting the Colourwork. So that's the only reason there's a larger needle size in there is specifically for Colourwork. But you're right, I can get that updated to specify that it's a smaller needle gauge. Because the Colourwork one wasn't, a lot of people don't necessarily need to change for the color working, in which case they'd just be using the single needle size the whole way through. So we'll talk first of all, because it's going to apply for both, about how you go about working the sleeves. So you've got stitches that are held. You'll either have them on waste yarn or maybe a spare needle, or perhaps if you're using barber cords, they'll be on barber cords. And then to finish it, you're going to be picking up stitches across the underarm here. So if I turn her around, lift this up, and you can see this is the section where you're going to pick up stitches. And I usually leave a series of cast on stitches. And because we did the cable cast on, it's going to be a little firmer on the back to pick up from. So it'll be quite satisfying, and kind of it's going to give you a nice easy way to pick them up. So you'll start in the middle and pick up half of them along one side, knit your stitches for the sleeve that you had held, and knit the other half. But one of the questions that came up was asking about gaps at the underarm, and that is really common problem with top-down knitting. There were a couple of different ways of dealing with it. One of the first ones that I was talking about is when you were doing the body, which obviously if you've gone past that, it's not going to be of use to you. But if you've done the body, you can do 2 less stitches and then pick up the gaps or where it's stretched out for those extra stitches, which can tighten it up a bit. What I always actually do on the sleeve is I will pick up 1 extra stitch over here and 1 extra stitch over there, and make sure where you're picking them up, it's somewhere where it's a fairly snug stitch. You don't want to put it into something where it's a big open space, because it's not going to help you at all. So you pick up 1 extra stitch on each side, and then you can decrease those on the next round. So the extra stitch helps both eliminate the hole, and the decrease then pulls it together at that point. So those two combined, I find, work really well to get rid of any gaps that you'll get along there. And of course, if you always make sure you give yourself a nice long tail when you're picking up the stitches, so that you can always just seam it up as you're going along. But there's a link or a tutorial on my website where I talk about tightening up stitches. It's in relation to very often cables or the edges of works, but you can actually just also pull any loose stitches up, because often it's more so than a gap, it's that those stitches can end up being a little loose, seems to be what happens. So I think that question came from Maria. Oh, beg your pardon, no, Jane. Jane was where that question came from. So Jane, hopefully that actually helps answer it for you and gives you a fairly good feel for how you kind of can sort it out as you're going through. So there's another question here. I think Maria, hopefully Maria, you're watching now. I will reply in KnitHub in a short while, but there are two different, you had two questions, and one of them you were asking about how on the neck, how you go, why I'm not working the ribbing at the start. So I did go over this on the very first YouTube live, because it's something I usually do in my top-down sweaters, and I do have several very good reasons for it. So the first one is when you're knitting top down, that is where all of the pressure is coming. It's around the neck. When it hangs, it tends to hang from the neck. You can see the weight, all the weight hangs from the neck. So if it's going to stretch out, it's most likely to stretch out around the neck. And we really don't want it to stretch out and lose shape. And it may have started fitting you and then spreads out. So if you start with a cast on and then pick up stitches and then do a bind off, you've got the original cast on, you've got the picked up stitches, and you've got the final bind off, all working to actually hold the neck into place. And so it's like a triple benefit basically of putting it together. So you end up with a neck that is much, much less likely to stretch out. So that's the first reason. It's kind of the primary reason I end up using. And then the other reason is it gives you a lot more flexibility. So if you're not sure what you want it to look like when you're finished, you can start with the neckline a little bit more open, a little bit further down here. And then when you're finished and you try it on, you pick up the stitches. And when you look at it and you're like, actually, I like it the way it is, I don't want any ribbing, you've got the option of just doing an I-cord bind off or just binding those stitches off again really quickly and leaving it with the very open neck. So it gives you way more flexibility to do that afterwards, because you can decide, do you want it tighter? Do you want it looser? Do you want more? Do you want less? And you can answer all those questions afterwards, because I think the neck is really personal and can really finish it and make it your own as you're going through. So hopefully that's helped. I will pop that in again afterwards, or we can link into it in this section here. And I think you had another question as well here. You're saying that you've used a couple of colors in the cardigan yoke, so you have some loose ends. Can they be woven into the stake area so they don't appear in the cardigan? So the answer is yes and no. First of all, I wouldn't go weaving them in, particularly while you're cutting your steek, because you're going to want to cut through everything. So don't weave those in until after you've done the steek. But you actually have one big advantage in that, because you're starting and stopping ends here, when you cut your steek and this folds over, you have the option of actually hiding all of those ends in there, tucking them in, and then when you whip stitch this down, it's going to trap them all in that sandwich, and you don't have to weave anything in. You can just trap them in. So you can do very minimal weaving to make sure that you don't have any loose stitches. Once you know that the stitch is fairly well anchored, you can then just hide it in the little part where you fold over. So the answer is, don't weave them into the actual bridge, but you can then use where you cut and the where you whip stitch back to fold it over. You can hide it really well in there. So hopefully that helps, and it should make your life a lot easier. Now, we also, I don't think, oh, there was a couple of, we were going to talk a bit about steeking, and there was one from Margaret. She was thinking ahead to the steek. You're a bit nervous about keeping the cutting in a straight line, as there's a lot of it in the plain stockinette stitch. Do I have any advice? Now, I did answer in the forum, but I thought it would be useful to have in here again. What I did is I used a thread that I just took basically a cotton yarn, a fairly fine one, but a contrast color with the rest of it. And I threaded it all the way up through that central stitch. So that way I had basically a guideline to show me where I was going to be doing my crochet on each side. So I didn't have to worry about weaving off kilter as I was going along. Now, if you're doing the Daingean cardigan, obviously if you're doing the sweater, this is irrelevant. This is just for the cardigan. If you're doing the cardigan, I do have a video where I did it. So you can take a look at that and see how I used it as a guideline through. But you're totally right. It's very easy to kind of accidentally scooting over one stitch one way or another when you're doing the crochet chain as you're going up. Like fortunately, once you've got that crochet chain going down all the way down, then you don't have to worry about the steek because your crochet chain are like guide rails going up each side. You'll see very clearly what's going on. Now, there was a couple of comments as well talking about Nua and and somebody feeling it was a little too slippery for steeking. It's obviously not going to be as sticky as 100% wool, like something like Darney or particularly Icelandic or Scottish yarns or Shetland yarns. So those are really, really sticky, but it does felt. Like if you've ever tried to felt the ends together, it will felt, which means that it can be used for steeking, but you just have to be a little bit more careful in the process and watch for what you're going to anchor. If you're very concerned, then you can actually do what I would refer to as the double steek, where what I've done on this, so this is folded over. Let me bring it up here. So this is folded over, crochet steek, and the edges tied down. And you can actually see that nothing has escaped. I look up and down and they're very secure and there's no ends poking out. So it does work very well for it. So for that, I used a sock yarn, kind of a woolly sock yarn, small crochet hook, and I crocheted one half of the middle stitch with the half of the stitch next to it, and one half of that middle bridge stitch with the stitch on the other side going up the other side. So I've got two crochet chains running up each side with a path that I can use to cut. So that is it feels very secure because you're anchoring every single stitch as you go up. Now, if you feel it's getting a little bit too, if you feel that it's getting a little bit too loose and you don't feel secure with it, and you have a sewing machine or even hand sewing, you also have the option of actually just sewing up along each side, and that's going to go ahead and do the very same thing for you. So that's one of the benefits of having different ways of steeking. You can kind of decide, what's my yarn like, what's it going to do, and how's it going to hold? And then the third option that because this is feltable, is also an option, and this happens more often in Shetland, because they tend to, in fact, in Shetland, because they view it as so sticky, often they don't do any kind of reinforcing. They just cut and assume, particularly in the Colourwork areas, that it's going to hold. But in some stockinette stitch areas like that, where you don't have two layers of color one on top of each other, they will use a felting pen and they'll felt in. So with that, you've got a pen which is basically got sharp little needles on the top, and something like this is a felting mat, but you can also use anything that you can put underneath that it's not going to go through. And the part you want to felt, which is going to be your bridge, you can come along down like this, poke it in, and then when you turn it over, you will see that the inside is felted. So if there's areas where you've done the crochet steek and you feel really uncomfortable with it, you can also, if you have a felting pen, go ahead and go down and go needle felt your way down. And what that will do is it's going to give it it's going to lock those in pre-felted, so it just starts the process of it holding all the stitches together. Now, the other thing that I've done with this that I haven't done before that does really help post steeking is before I cut the steek, I did all of the edging. So that means all you're doing after you steek is you're cutting the middle, you're folding it back and you're whip stitching it, but you're not doing any other pulling on the stitches. And that will mean that there's much less wear and tear and potential for pulling stuff out. So I did that by just the point where you go from the edging of the color work into the bridge. I picked up stitches all the way along here and worked it. And again, on the video, you'll see it. It looks really strange because it looks like a fake cardigan because you've got all of the fronts, you've got the neck, but then the middle is still joined, and then you cut that afterwards. But the reason I did those first of all, they don't have to be done first of all. But if you're concerned about something not holding, it means that you're not managing or manhandling those stitches again, so to speak, afterwards. So in case you're wondering why I did it that way, that was the reasoning behind it. So you can see this, like, I would kind of view it as three different ways of going ahead and felting your needle felting, not felting, of steeking, reinforcing your steek. So felting, crochet reinforcement, or sewn reinforcement, depending on the kind of yarn you're using and your comfort level. Melvia, after the felting, you still have to whip stitch the edges? You would, because you're still cutting it, so you're going to have a raw, like the purpose for the whip stitching is not to hold anything in place, it's just to tidy it down so you don't have this raw bit of knitting flapping around, because it doesn't look very attractive. It's just a little bit that's kind of sticking out. You don't have to whip stitch down. If you want to instead just get a ribbon, a gross grain ribbon or something, and sew it on the back, that will do the same job. The only purpose of the whip stitching is just to tidy it up and make it look better on the back. So yeah, if you prefer a ribbon, just pop that on top instead of whip stitching. It's kind of up to you. And with this, I ended up using the yarn I used for the reinforcing is a green, it's just a slightly lighter green, so it's more invisible than normal. If you could also use like a really bright contrast one, which is going to look kind of interesting. And I whip stitched down using the green from the yarn, so the actual the green as you go. Melvia, you might try the felting. Yeah, take a look, because on the front, it was really interesting. It doesn't look like it's felted on the front, and then when you flip it over, you can see very clearly that it's felted along the back. So it was a new one to me, and it had been introduced to me slowly. And then a friend of mine tried it out. She said she needed to steek something, and she couldn't face doing all of the crochet steeking, and she had a felting pen. So she went ahead and did it, and she was delighted with the results. And I didn't do the full needle felting on this. I just tried it on a small section after the crochet chain, and it looked really good to me. So I think it's definitely a runner. So taking a look down here, the next question is taking a look at sleeve lengths and different kinds of sleeve options. So I was talking first of all about the fact that you can use either a short or a long sleeve. With the short one, you've got slightly less ribbing, because if you had several inches of ribbing at the edge, it's going to look way too much on the short sleeve version. But you might possibly decide to change the length to a 3/4 length or elbow length or something like that. So if you're doing that, remember that you're not going to need as many decreases as this, because if you take a look at the arm, the biggest part is up here, so you've got the most stitches, but that actually stays wide fairly far down. So for most people, it's only past the elbow that you really start getting a lot of decrease in size, and then eventually coming down to the narrowest at the wrist. So you're probably, if you're doing a 3/4 length, you can get away with quite a bit less decreases. What you can do is measure around here, give yourself a little bit of ease, and see how many stitches you want here, what size you want. So shorter length sleeve, particularly if it's coming up here and you're not worried about it flopping over your hand, I would be inclined to work less decreases, but the amount you work would be very much dependent on what size you wanted down here. If you're adding length to your sleeve, but you want to keep this size, then you probably want to start spacing those decreases a little bit further apart. Or alternatively, if you want a shorter sleeve but still want the same amount of decreases, you might want to space them a little closer. Or you might opt to leave the first part as it is, and then perhaps space the bottom ones a little closer together. Because remember, because the sleeve or rather the arm, I should say, does tend to be wider this far and then comes down very far. You'll see at the beginning there's several inches where it goes straight, and it's only then you start your decreases. But you could do it where you go very slowly here and then speed it up a little bit more down there, particularly if you've got a much smaller wrist, but your bicep stays wider for a lot further down. So take a look at your arm, maybe even measure at different points and decide if you want to adjust where you're putting those decreases on based on your own sleeve size, really. So just a few things to think about as you're going through the process and looking at sleeves and making sure that they fit. And most importantly, if you do it on one side, make sure you do it on the other side. Record it, put markers down for each decrease, whatever you need to do so that you don't end up with one side done one way and then come back a few weeks later and try desperately to remember what decreases or what you had done on the other side, because that's pretty common where you end up just modifying as you're going along and going, I'll totally remember this when I get back to it. And if you're anything like me, unless you do it immediately, and even then you will not remember the specifics. You won't remember the numbers you had. You won't remember where the spacing was. And I mean, the best you can do is deconstruct on the back of your sleeve, where you take a look at it and you watch for your decreases and you start counting between them, which you can do, but it's so much easier if you write it down. So if you make any changes, make sure you write it down. So you'll make future you very, very happy, because you won't have to try and deconstruct the knitting in your on your sleeve, even though it can be done, of course. I'm having a look up here. I think everyone must be on holidays. We've got a smaller group than usual here. I suspect everyone is kind of heading in and out and is on holiday mode, or else you're all just so busy knitting your Daingean that you couldn't take. You're like, I'm just going to go away and start knitting, and I'll come back and look at the live afterwards to answer my questions. It's totally possible. But because this is recorded, anyone who comes along afterwards and wants to see what's on here, it's all here for you. So it's not going anywhere. Now, there's a couple of bits that I wanted to say as well. The first is clue 2, so that's knitting the body. When you finish that, make sure you get it up on the thread in Knit Up, because there's still a few more days to be in the chance for winning a prize in the raffle. 9th of June is going to be when we pick our prize. So just get your photograph up there on the thread before the 9th of June, and you could be in with the chance of winning a self-published pattern from Sew and Stitches. And the next one is the YouTube live is going to be the next one. We're going to be on the 19th of June. And this one is going to be pretty special because I will be joined by another designer. I'm not going to tell you quite yet, but you will not want to miss it. So pop it in your calendar. It's going to be the same time, 4:30, and it'll be the 19th of June. Judy, you use the larger needle for the bust increase and it seems to have worked. You need to block it out, but it looks good. Oh, that's great. So for anyone who is kind of joined in now and hasn't seen the last couple of YouTube lives in Daingean, Judy was considering trying a larger needle size for the bust and then dropping back down to just get a little bit more room with the bust without actually adding any increases. And I'm delighted to hear that worked. I will definitely use that in the future to throw out a suggestion if you were happy with the results. And the gauge difference was subtle enough that it's not going to be terribly visibly noticeable, except that you've got more room there. That's great to know. Thank you for letting me know. The other thing I wanted to let you know about is right now our summer seasons is open. So don't worry, you can finish your Daingean first. It's not going to be shipped until July with the pattern mid-July. But for the summer, it's going to be a really nice lace combined with short row project. So it's a shawl, but a shawl that is going to have some optional armholes. So if you want to wear it as a vest with a draped front, it can be worn as that too. So I've finished it, and I am very fond of it, I have to tell you, because the yarn is Life in the Long Grass, and it's a silk merino blend. So it's got this really nice drape to it. So when you wear it, the fronts really flow very nicely. Of course, there's also a digital option. So if you prefer to get just digital content, perhaps you've got plenty of yarn at home, or you've got a yarn in mind you'd like to use, then the digital option is also there. So it's open for just a short little while longer. It'll be closing on the 14th. So if you do want to opt in, come along in the next 9 days, and you'll be in with a chance to join us in July for the project. I think Hannah has just popped up the link up there. So if you want to jump in or learn more about it, you can jump in. And we'll be using two different kinds of short rows. I'll have German short rows and some Japanese short rows, which I haven't used in a while, but are very handy in particular circumstances. So I'll be talking a little bit about on the Zoom we have with that, the differences between the two of them and why you'd use one versus the other, and how you can combine them and things like that. Hey, Barbara, from Stuttgart, you've opted for the sweater. You're not feeling comfortable with the idea of cutting your knitting. And now you think it might not be as terrible as you thought. No, it's really not as terrible. What I'm saying to anyone who hasn't steeked before, if you make just a small swatch, it can be flat. It doesn't have to be on the round. It can be Colourwork is good, but you can do it with you can just do a stockinette stitch one, and try out each of the reinforcement styles with your yarn. So on that, you can do a couple of crochet chains on each side, practicing how it works, and then cut. If you've got a felting needle, you could do another section where you felt it and practice cutting it. So that way there'll be no surprises when you do the cardigan, because you're going to take the yarn you use, and you can use the reinforcing method you're going to use, and you can feel really, really comfortable going in and know where you're having difficulty with it and spots that you need to watch carefully. Like for me, it's the bind off and the cast on here and the bind off are where I need to pay careful attention, because that's where I'm most likely to not fully reinforce. So I'll often end up even doing an extra chain along the side there to make sure that I've got that locked in. But that all comes from practice. It just from trying it out and realizing that I wasn't as happy with it. And also, if you find something hasn't been done perfectly, you can sew down those sections before they go anywhere. It doesn't tend to just completely unravel. It's going to, you can actually protect it in the spots where you need it. So there are plenty of options. Tabby, you're concentrating on your first sleeve. You'll worry about the steeking when it's time. You can't think about it yet. Exactly. Don't worry about it now. Get your sleeves done, and then do some steeking practice on a swatch, and then you can jump into another cardigan. So small steps, feel comfortable with the technique, feel comfortable with the yarn and how it behaves with it, and then you can move on to the sweater version. In case anyone is, I don't know if you can hear it, it has started pouring outside, but it's very, very much a summer shower, because sun shines in the distance, very bright clouds, and then the rain's coming down just here. So it's probably going to be gone in 30 seconds again. I kind of love it. It makes it feel like we just need to power wash the neighborhood for 2 minutes, and then we'll come back to resume normal. Weather shall resume after that. Keep everything clean. So I am going to wind up now, and we'll pop this up to be saved. So if you want to watch it after the fact, it'll be here for you. And I hope wherever you are this June, you are enjoying some sunshine, some knitting, and trying to just chill out a little bit and, yeah, absorb a bit of vitamin D. And if you've got even a small bit of sunshine out there, oh my gosh, even more. No thunder though, thankfully, outside. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you all in a few weeks' time with my surprise guest.